It's not popular these days to believe in free will, but you have it whether you acknowledge it or not. You make choices. Good choices lead to good outcomes ultimately. You get to shape your life. You get to bring meaning to your life. So the idea that you didn't build that is ludicrous. You do build it, and therefore you deserve credit for it. But to really get that credit for it, we need to rethink our whole conception of what is moral. Morality is an important thing. Morality is kind of a guide to life. It's like tells you what's good and what's evil, what's right and what's wrong. And we've kind of lived on a certain framing of all of that for about 2,000 years that has been very clear that all of morality is guided towards this selflessness, towards other people. But that doesn't really answer the real crux of what morality is really for. We're a unique species. We're not born with a DNA that guides how we survive and how we live. We're not born with a knowledge of how to survive in the world. Like I take any one of you and I pluck you down into the Amazon. And if you just rely on your DNA and what's programmed in you, how long will it take for you to die? One day, a week, not very long. But yet, I'm sure that if I plucked this entire group under the Amazon, some of you will survive and survive quite well. What will you have to do in order to survive? Use your mind. You'll have to think. You'd have to create. You'd have to figure stuff out. You'd have to find solutions to problems that you face. We're not programmed because you take an animal, either their programming works in this environment or it doesn't work in this environment. If it doesn't work, they die. If it works, they thrive. Human beings will adapt, will adjust, because we have this amazing tool called our mind, our reasoning capacity, that can adjust to the environment that we see. You all know Yuval Noah Harari, famous philosopher out there. He's got this TED Talk where he says, you put a chimpanzee and a human being on a desert island. And he says, the chimpanzee will do great, and the human being will die. And with all due respect, Yuval, that's nuts. The chimpanzee will only thrive if the desert island happens to be accommodating to the programming that the chimpanzee has, to the environment that its DNA evolved in order to live by. If there's no food on the island that the chimpanzee can identify as food, he will die. The human being will adapt. He'll rediscover new food. He'll change his environment to fit his needs. The human being is the one who will thrive. The chimpanzee is the one who will die. Because we have the capacity to reason. Now, because of that, if we're going to have a morality is a guide to what is good and what is not. Based on what criteria? Well, what I would say, what we need is a guide to what allows us to survive in this world and what will kill us. Generally, what will kill us is evil and bad. What will allow us to thrive is good. And we need to be taught that because the world is much more complex than just a desert island. We're not going to just figure it out on the floor. What kind of life do we want to live? So we need to recalibrate or rethink what morality is to think in terms of how do we survive? How do we thrive? How do we flourish as human beings? What is the way in which we can live the best life that we can live? Not how do we sacrifice to other people? How do we take care of other people? That might be a piece of it. The question of how do we relate to others. But the fundamental is, how do we live? Because we don't know. It's not obvious. Philosophers have been thinking about this for thousands of years. How do we live? What's that? Yeah, but how? As individuals doing what? We need guide. We need a guide. We need a guide to tell us what is good and what is bad on the principle. And this is what morality is for. Those principles that lead to life, Those principles we want are good. Those principles that lead to death are ones that we want to avoid. Those principles that encourage us or promote our success, our flourishing, our happiness are good. Those that are anti all that are evil. So morality should be a guide to living. It should be a guide to living a good life. It should be focused on our self-interest. Not just on how we treat other people, but how we treat ourselves. Morality exists on a desert island. On a desert island, you have to make choices about how you're going to live, if you're going to live. Even though there's nobody else there. So it's time to rethink and maybe abandon that old morality that only focuses on being selfless. I mean, the main question with the morality of selflessness is why? Why should I be selfish? Why shouldn't I live for myself? I mean, all I've got is me. I don't know about you guys, but all I have is my life. And you only have one of it. You don't get a second chance. Every minute that passes, you will never get back. As you get older, you realize this more and more. You don't get reruns. You don't get an afterlife. This is it. Why not make the most of this? Why not make this the best that it can be?